Graphic audio. A movie in your mind.
Graphic Audio presents The Emperor's Soul, written by Brandon Sanderson, narrated by Colleen Delaney, performed by Kimberly Gilbert, Mort Shelby, Nora Ashrati, Thomas Keegan, Chris Genebach, Jacob Ye, Bradley Smith, Lise Bruneau, Henry Kramer, Scott McCormick, Nanette Savard, Terrence Aselford, Ken Jackson, Michael John Casey, Michael Glenn, Danny Stoller, Eric Messner, and Nathaniel Perry. Gaotona ran his fingers across the thick canvas, inspecting one of the greatest works of art he had ever seen. Unfortunately, it was a lie.
The woman is a danger. What she does is an abomination.
The voice belonged to Gaotona's fellow arbiters, the Empire's most important bureaucrats. Gaotona tipped the canvas toward the hearth's orange-red light, squinting. In his old age, his eyes weren't what they once had been. He inspected the brushstrokes, feeling the layers of thick oils.
Such precision. Exactly like those in the original.
He would never have spotted the mistakes on his own. A blossom slightly out of position, a moon that was just a sliver too low in the sky. It had taken their experts days of detailed inspection to find the errors.
She is one of the best forgers alive. She has a reputation as wide as the Empire. We need to execute her as an example.
No. She is a valuable tool. This woman can save us. We must use her.
This from the leader of the Arbiters, Frava.
Why would someone capable of this artistry, this majesty, turn to forgery? Why not create original paintings? Why not be a true artist? I must understand.
Yes, the woman is a thief, and she practices a horrid art, but I can control her. With her talents, we can fix this mess we have found ourselves in.
The look on the other faces spoke of worried objections. The woman they spoke of, Wan Shai Lu, was more than a simple con artist. So much more. She could change the nature of reality itself. That raised another question.
Why would she bother learning to paint? Isn't ordinary art mundane compared to her mystical talents? So many questions.
Gaotona looked up from his seat beside the hearth. The others stood in a conspiratorial clump around Frava's desk, their long, colorful robes shimmering in the firelight.
I agree with Frava.
The others glanced at him. Their scowls indicated they cared little for what he said, but their postures told a different tale. Their respect for him was buried deep, but it was remembered. Gaotona rose.
Send for the forger. I would hear what she has to say. I suspect she will be more difficult to control than Frava claims, but we have no choice. We either use this woman's skill, or we give up control of the Empire. How many years has it been since Frava and I have agreed on anything at all, let alone on something so divisive as making use of the forger?
One by one, the other three arbiters nodded.
Let it be done.
Day 2. Shai pressed her fingernail into one of the stone blocks of her prison cell. The rock gave way slightly. She rubbed the dust between her fingers. Limestone. An odd material for use in a prison wall, but the whole wall wasn't of limestone. Merely that single vein within the block.
Limestone.
That little vein had been easy to miss, but if she was right about it, she had finally identified all 44 types of rock in the wall of her circular pit of a prison cell. She knelt down beside her bunk. Using a fork, She'd bent back all the tines but one to carve notes into the wood of one bed leg. Without her spectacles, she had to squint as she wrote. To forge something, you had to know its past, its nature. She was almost ready. Her pleasure quickly slipped away, however, as she noticed another set of markings on the bed leg, lit by her flickering candle. Those kept track of her days of imprisonment.
So little time.
If her count was right, only a day remained before the date set for her public execution. Deep inside, her nerves were drawn as tight as strings on an instrument.
1 day.
1 day remaining to create a soul stamp and escape. But she had no soul stone, only a crude piece of wood, and her only tool for carving was a fork. It would be incredibly difficult. That was the point. This cell was meant for one of her kind, built of stones with many different veins of rock in them to make them difficult to forge. They would come from different quarries and would each have a unique history. Knowing as little as she did, forging them would be nearly impossible. And even if she did transform the rock, there was probably some other fail-safe to stop her.
Nights. What a mess I've gotten myself into.
Notes finished, she found herself looking at her bent fork. She'd begun carving the wooden handle after prying off the metal portion as a crude soul stamp.
You're not going to get out this way, Shai. You need another method.
She'd waited 6 days, searching for another way out. Guards to exploit, someone to bribe, a hint about the nature of her cell. So far, nothing. Far above, the door to the dungeons opened. Shai leapt to her feet, tucking the fork handle into her waistband at the small of her back.
Did they move up my execution?
She squinted at the newcomers who appeared above her cell. 4 were guards, accompanying a man with long features and fingers. A Grand, the race who led the Empire. That robe of blue and green indicated a minor functionary who had passed the tests for government service, but not risen high in its ranks. The Grand leaned down to look at her through the grate.
Open it.
Shai stood back as they opened her cell's ceiling, then lowered a ladder.
The arbiters wish to interrogate you, forger.
She climbed, wary. If she were going to take someone to an early execution, she'd have let the prisoner think something else was happening so she wouldn't resist. However, they didn't lock Shai in manacles as they marched her out of the dungeons. Judging by their route, they did indeed seem to be taking her toward the arbiter's study. Shai walked in front.
A new challenge, then.
Dare she hope for an opportunity? She shouldn't have been caught, but she could do nothing about that now. She had been bested, betrayed by the Imperial Fool when she'd assumed she could trust him. He had taken her copy of the Moon Scepter and swapped it for the original, then run off. Shai's Uncle Juan had taught her that being bested was a rule of life. No matter how good you were, someone was better. Live by that knowledge, and you would never grow so confident that you became sloppy. Last time, she had lost.
This time I will win. This time, I'm playing not for riches, but my life.
The guards were strikers, or, well, that was the grand name for them. They had once called themselves Maladil, but their nation had been folded into the Empire so long ago that few used the name. Strikers were a tall people, with a lean musculature and pale skin. They had hair almost as dark as Shai's, though theirs curled while hers lay straight and long. She tried with some success not to feel dwarfed by them. Her people, the Maipan, were not known for their stature.
You. I remember you.
Judging by that styled hair, the youthful captain did not often wear a helmet. Strikers were well regarded by the Grands, and their elevation was not unheard of. This one had a look of eagerness to him. That polished armor, that crisp air. Yes, he fancied himself bound for important things in the future.
The horse. You threw me over the back of your horse after I was captured. Tall animal. Gurish descent. Pure white. Good animal. You know your horse flesh.
The striker kept his eyes forward.
I'm going to enjoy killing you, woman.
Lovely.
They entered the imperial wing of the palace. The stonework here was marvelous, after the ancient Lamio style, with tall pillars of marble inlaid with reliefs. Those large urns between the pillars had been created to mimic Lamio pottery from long ago.
Actually, the heritage faction still rules, so...
The Emperor would be from that faction, as would the Council of Five Arbiters who did much of the actual ruling. Their faction lauded the glory and learning of past cultures, even going so far as to rebuild their wing of the palace as an imitation of an ancient building. Shai suspected that on the bottoms of those ancient urns would be soul stamps that had transformed them into perfect imitations of famous pieces. Yes, the Grands called Shai's powers an abomination, but their only aspect that was technically illegal was creating a forgery to change a person. Quiet forgery of objects was allowed, even exploited in the Empire, so long as the forger was carefully controlled. If someone were to turn over one of those urns and remove the stamp on the bottom, the piece would become simple, unornamented pottery. The strikers led her to a door with gold inlay. She managed to catch a glimpse of the red soul stamp on the bottom inside edge, transforming the door into an imitation of some work from the past. The guards ushered her into a homey room with a crackling hearth, deep rugs, and stained wood furnishings.
5th century hunting lodge?
All 5 arbiters of the heritage faction waited inside. 3, 2 women, 1 man, sat in tall-backed chairs at the hearth. 1 other woman occupied the desk just inside the doors. Frava, senior among the arbiters of the heritage faction, was probably the most powerful person in the Empire other than Emperor Ashravan himself. Her graying hair was woven into a long braid with gold and red ribbons. It draped a robe of matching gold. Shai had long pondered how to rob this woman as, among her duties, Frava oversaw the Imperial Gallery and had offices adjacent to it. Frava had obviously been arguing with Gaotona, the elderly male Grand standing beside the desk. He stood up straight and clasped his hands behind his back in a thoughtful pose. Gaotona was eldest of the ruling arbiters. He was said to be the least influential among them, out of favor with the Emperor. Both eyed her as if she were a cat that had just knocked over a fine vase. Shai missed her spectacles, but took care not to squint as she stepped up to face these people. She needed to look as strong as possible. Frava picked up a sheet of paper from the desk.
One Shai Lu. You have quite the list of crimes credited to your name. Impersonating a noblewoman of rank, breaking into the palace's imperial gallery, reforging your soul, and, of course, the attempted theft of the Moon Scepter. Did you really assume that we would fail to recognize a simple forgery of such an important imperial possession?
You have done just that, assuming that the fool escaped with the original.
It gave Shai a little thrill of satisfaction to know that her forgery now occupied the Moon Scepter's position of honor in the Imperial Gallery.
And what of this?
A striker produced a painting and placed it on the desk. Han Shushen's masterpiece, Lily of the Spring Pond.
We found this in your room at the inn. It is a copy of a painting I myself own, one of the most famous in the Empire. We gave it to our assessors, and they judged that your forgery was amateur at best.
Shai met the woman's eyes. Frava leaned forward.
Tell me why you have created this forgery. You were obviously planning to swap this for the painting in my office by the Imperial Gallery, and yet you were striving for the Moon Scepter itself. Why plan to steal the painting, too? Greed?
My Uncle Juan